Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. We're all about getting to the heart of things, cutting through all the extra stuff, and today we've got a really interesting deep dive. It's especially for you, the learner, who wants to understand the key ideas quickly, deeply, and without feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah, exactly. So for this deep dive, we're going into a book that's been talked about a lot, Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki and Sharon Lechter. And we've taken all those important lessons, the core principles they lay out, and distilled it down to what we think are the absolute most valuable pieces.
Yeah. And our aim today is very specific to extract those powerful ideas about financial education and the really crucial mindset shifts that Rich Dad, Poor Dad emphasizes. So think of this as your shortcut to understanding the book's main arguments and how they might even change your own financial thinking.
That's right.
So let's get into it. Right off the bat, the book kind of throws you into this really stark contrast between two very different financial philosophies, right?
Absolutely. The whole foundation of the book is built on this contrast. The author experienced it firsthand. He got completely opposite financial advice from his two father figures. His own dad, the poor dad, a highly educated guy with a very traditional career mindset, and his friend Mike's dad, the rich dad, a self-made entrepreneur.
Yeah. And this contrast is really brought to life right from the start with a story about the author's son and how he questions the real value of traditional education when it comes to actually building wealth. Can you talk about that a little more?
Right, so what's fascinating is that the son makes this really insightful observation. He points to people like Michael Jordan, Madonna, Bill Gates, and says, their massive wealth didn't just come from excelling in school and academics. He realized that things have changed. That old belief, good grades and a safe job equal financial success, that doesn't always hold true anymore.
Yeah, it's like you saying, hey, look around, the world's changed.
Yeah, exactly. It highlights the book's main argument. True financial intelligence comes from a different type of learning. It's not always what you get in a traditional classroom.
Like a real challenge to that traditional way of thinking.
Right.
And it's right from that point, the book introduces this really impactful concept of the rat race. Can you kind of break that down for us in a way that really, hits home?
Yeah, so the rat race, as the book describes it, is this never-ending cycle that a lot of us see people caught in. It's that thing where you work hard, you earn money, but then it disappears immediately into bills, maybe even debt, and you're forced to get back on that treadmill and do it all over again.
And the book even uses the visual of, it's a wheel. You're just running on this wheel.
Yeah, that's it.
You never get anywhere.
Yeah, it's like a treadmill fueled by all those things we desire.
Yeah.
A bigger house, a nicer car, and also those underlying fears that drive us. The fear of not being able to pay the bills, maybe losing our job. And it gives this example, this very relatable picture of a young couple whose income actually goes up. But as their income increases, so do their expenses, their taxes, and their debt.
Wow. So, just earning more doesn't actually solve the core issue.
No, it doesn't. It's like pouring water into a leaky bucket, right? Simply making more money without getting control of those liabilities, it doesn't lead to real wealth.
I like that, pouring water into a leaky bucket. It's so true.
Right.
And that's where I think the drastically different advice that these two dads give really takes on, even more significance.
Exactly. So the poor dad's advice, it's that conventional wisdom we've all heard, right? Go to school, get good grades, and get a secure job with great benefits.
That's the traditional path.
That's it. But the rich dad, he actually sees this advice as not only outdated, but maybe even a bit risky in our world today, with how fast things change.
Yeah, the world's very different now.
Yeah, and the rich dad believes that wealthy people, they actually play by a whole different set of rules when it comes to money. And these rules, they aren't taught in schools. They're often learned at home within families. So that's why blindly following that traditional advice, it might actually be holding you back.
It's like you're playing the wrong game.
Yeah. Exactly.
You're following the wrong set of rules. And the book, it goes into some really key contrasting beliefs that these two dads hold, right? Can you talk about those?
Absolutely. This is where their different philosophies really shine through. Take their views on money itself. The poor dad believed, that common saying, love of money is the root of all evil. But the rich dad countered with, the lack of money is the root of all evil. Right there, you see how differently they view money's role in life. Another big difference is their attitude towards risk. The poor dad leaned towards playing it safe, prioritizing security, whereas the rich dad thought it was much more important to learn how to understand and manage risk, to be intelligent about it.
It's not about avoiding risk altogether, it's about understanding it.
Right, exactly. And then maybe one of the most debated points in the book is their perspective on house.
Yeah, this is a big one.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
The poor dad thought their house was their biggest investment, their primary asset. But the rich dad actually viewed a primary residence as a liability, something that drains your resources.
So, it's not about how much money you make, it's about how you think about money and what you do with it. And this leads us into that first core lesson. The rich don't work for money. It sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it?
It does. At first glance, it seems completely upside down. To show how different this perspective is, the author shares his experience working for the rich dad alongside his friend Mike. And for a while, they were paid very little, like 10 cents an hour at first.
That's hardly anything.
Yeah, and then even that stopped. And it wasn't about taking advantage of them. It was this really intentional way of teaching. The rich dad wanted them to get this core principle ingrained in them. Don't just work for money. Make your money work for you.
And this lesson was taught through some very memorable analogies, like the idea of life constantly giving you a push.
Yeah, the rich dad used that analogy a lot. He talked about how life is constantly pushing us, and those pushes can show up as financial setbacks, job insecurity, maybe even unexpected expenses, anything that throws you off balance.
And he said that most people react to those pushes with anger.
Yeah, they get angry or blame someone else.
They blame the economy, they blame their boss.
Yeah, or they just give up. But the important lesson there is to actually see those pushes as signals. It's an opportunity to learn and adapt. And those who learn from these challenges, they're the ones who ultimately end up ahead financially.
It's like, instead of complaining about needing a raise because you're short on cash, you need to look at the root cause of the problem. Like, why are you always short on cash?
Exactly. The author himself wanted a raise during this time, and the rich dad's response was so insightful. He said that most people, they just look for a job that pays more, thinking more money will fix everything. But that doesn't get to the root of the problem. The lack of financial understanding. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a bigger wound.
Yeah, it's a temporary fix, not a long-term solution.
Right, exactly. And this leads right to that lesson number 1. The poor and the middle class work for money. The rich have money work for them.
And what keeps people stuck in that cycle of just trading their time for money?
Fear. Fear is a huge driver.
Fear of what?
Fear of all sorts of things. Not paying bills, losing your job, their sense of security, not having enough for retirement. Those anxieties make them feel like they need that regular paycheck. And it keeps them from exploring other ways to build wealth, ways that might seem a bit risky or uncertain.
Makes sense. And the rich dad also brought up taxes pretty early in the lessons, and he highlighted a difference in how wealthy people and the middle class experience taxes. Can you explain that?
Yes, he did. The rich dad pointed out that for most people, the government is taking a cut at almost every stage. When they earn, when they spend, when they save, even when they die. And he explained that the wealthy, through their understanding of the system, they use things like corporations, and we'll talk about those more later, to legally reduce their tax burden. And that's something the middle class and poor often don't have access to.
So it's like a different set of rules.
It is, in a way.
And I remember the book shares this interesting experiment the rich dad did with you and Mike, where he offered you increasing hourly wages. What was he trying to teach you with that?
Oh, that was a really clever experiment. He started us off at a really low wage, then offered to increase it from $1 to $2, then $5 an hour. But it wasn't about the money itself. He was watching how we reacted, how our mindset changed. He saw how quickly that desire for more money, that instant gratification, started to overshadow the bigger lesson he was trying to teach.
You got distracted by the immediate reward.
We did, yeah. We almost lost sight of the big picture because of that immediate, I want more feeling. And his point was that even though fear drives a lot of people to work for money, the rich also feel fear, especially the fear of losing what they've built. And as their wealth grows, that fear can actually get stronger.
So, it's not that the rich don't have emotions when it comes to money.
Absolutely not. They experience fear too.
It's about how they manage those emotions.
Exactly. The rich dad was clear about that. Emotions are part of being human. He called them energy in motion. But the key skill is to use your mind, your intellect, to analyze those emotions. You have to use them to your advantage instead of letting them control your financial choices.
And the book uses that carrot on a stick analogy here, right?
Yes, it does. It shows how that constant wanting material things, whether it's a new toy or a fancy gadget, can keep people running on that rat race treadmill You're always working for the next shiny thing.
Never satisfied.
Never satisfied, yeah. And this cycle of desire fuels the need to work for money. It keeps people from building assets that could actually give them real financial independence.
And it's interesting, the rich dad was also critical of traditional business schools and how they approach this whole idea of working for money.
Yeah, he thought business schools often focus too much on creating what he calls sophisticated bean counters. People who are great at analyzing numbers and cutting costs, but maybe lack that bigger vision.
They don't see the bigger picture.
Right. They might not have that entrepreneurial mindset needed to build real wealth. He was concerned that focusing too much on minimizing costs could stifle innovation and prevent the kind of bold action you need to make it big.
Yeah.
Understanding numbers is important, but it's only one piece.
So, we have a job because we need money, but a job might not be the best long-term answer to our financial problems.
That's right. And the book calls that constant need to cover bills the tar baby. It sticks to you and makes it really hard to break free. You're always addressing that immediate need for income, but you're not tackling the underlying issue. Not knowing enough about money and not having assets that generate income.
So you're stuck.
Yeah, stuck in that cycle.
And the book also talks about the kind of thinking that keeps people financially stuck, like that emotional thinking,
Yeah,
versus a more clear and analytical way of looking at money.
absolutely. It points out those common phrases we hear. Everyone has to work for a living, or the rich are all greedy, or I deserve a raise just for showing up.
And those kinds of statements, they stop people from thinking critically.
Yeah, they shut down any exploration of other financial paths. Clear thinking, on the other hand, involves questioning those assumptions.
Asking why.
Yeah, asking, am I missing something here? Is there a different way to do this?
That's a great question. And then there's that really interesting idea that the rich invent money rather than just earning it through a job. What does that even mean?
Well, the rich dad explained that wealthy people often create their own opportunities. They find ways to make money that go beyond that typical employee-employer relationship. And he used this funny example, even though it wasn't legal, about making lead nickel coins. Obviously, that's not the way to do it, but the point was to encourage a mindset of actively creating wealth, not just waiting for it to come to you.
So, like being proactive.
Exactly.
And this whole first section of the book, it ends with the story of the comic book library that you and Mike started. How does that story connect to the idea of making money work for you?
Oh, yeah. That was our first real taste of entrepreneurship. Instead of just earning that tiny wage at the convenience store, we found something that people overlooked: discarded comic books. And we figured out how to make them an income-generating asset. And we even hired Mike's little sister to manage the library, showing the idea of having others work for you, generating passive income.
So you were working on the business, not just in the business.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
That's a great example. And this takes us to that second key lesson: why teach financial literacy? And the book starts this section with a really powerful historical example, right?
It does. It tells this story of this amazing gathering back in 1923 where some of the wealthiest and most influential businessmen in America came together.
So the best of the best.
Yeah, the top tier. But then the book contrasts their success at that moment with what happened just 25 years later. And it's pretty shocking. A lot of them ended up bankrupt, in prison, or had even taken their own lives.
Wow, so it's a cautionary tale.
It really is. It shows that just having money without a solid understanding of how to manage it leaves you vulnerable.
Money comes and goes.
Yeah, it could disappear just as quickly as it came. True wealth, the book argues, comes from understanding the fundamentals of money.
And the most important concept in this section is the difference between an asset and a liability. And this is presented as like a golden rule, right?
It is. The book states very clearly, rule number one, and the only true rule, is to know the difference between an asset and a liability, and to consistently buy assets. If you want to build wealth, this is the most critical piece of knowledge.
So how does the book actually define those two terms?
In a really simple and practical way. An asset puts money into your pocket, a liability takes money out of your pocket.
Okay, so pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it is. But even though it seems simple, this definition challenges some common beliefs, especially about owning a home.
Right, because so many people think their house is their biggest asset.
Yeah, and while owning a home definitely has emotional and personal value, the book argues that financially, for most people, their house is actually a liability.
A liability because of the expenses.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All those costs. Mortgage payments, property taxes, insurance, maintenance, repairs, all those things take money out of your pocket instead of putting money in. And The book uses these cash flow diagrams to show this difference.
You can really see it visually.
Yeah, you see how money moves differently for the rich, the middle class, and the poor. And it highlights how even high earners, like doctors, for example, can struggle financially.
Because they have all these liabilities.
Right? They have big mortgages, car loans, credit card debt. So even though they earn a lot, it gets eaten up by those liabilities.
That's a good point. So instead of focusing on just earning more, the focus should be on building those income-generating assets, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the book gives examples of those assets, like businesses that can run without you needing to be there all the time.
So you're not trading your time for money.
Yeah, or investments in stocks and bonds, income-producing real estate, and things like royalties from books or music. The key is these assets can generate income whether you're working or not.
They work for you. And the book also talks about a different way to think about wealth, one that goes beyond just looking at net worth.
Right, it uses this definition from Buckminster Fuller. Wealth is the number of days you can survive without physically working and still maintain your current standard of living.
So it's not about how much money you have in the bank. It's about how long you can go without working and still be okay.
Exactly. The ultimate goal is to build your assets to the point where the income they produce can cover all your expenses. That's real financial independence.
And that brings us to the third key lesson, mind your own business. But it's not literally about starting a company, right?
No, not necessarily. The book tells a story about Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's. When someone asked him what business he was in, he famously said, real estate. He knew that his real wealth came from owning the land those restaurants were built on. So minding your own business is really about focusing on building your assets, no matter what your job is.
It's about building that separate stream of income.
Exactly. The problem is, most people are so focused on increasing their income from their job, they forget about building assets.
They're always looking for that raise.
Yeah, but if that extra money doesn't go into assets, you're still on that treadmill.
Still stuck. And the book also talks about the risks of depending too much on your job for financial security.
Yeah, job security isn't what it used to be.
It can disappear.
Yeah, companies downsize, technology changes, economies fluctuate, and when you lose your job, those liabilities like your mortgage and car payments, they don't go away.
They keep draining your resources.
Yeah. That's why having assets that generate income is so important.
So your income isn't tied to just one source.
Right. And the book also points out that just looking at your net worth can be misleading. Net worth is simply assets minus liabilities, but it doesn't account for taxes you might have to pay if you sell those assets.
So it's not a complete picture.
No, it's not. The book argues that a better measure is to look at the actual cash flow your assets generate.
That's the money that's coming in regularly.
Yeah, the actual income.
So the advice here is keep your job, but start building your assets at the same time.
Exactly. Start small, be consistent, and build those assets while you still have the stability of your job.
Good advice. And that leads us to the fourth lesson, the history of taxes and the power of corporations. And this section dives into how taxes have evolved and how wealthy people use corporations to their advantage.
It does. It gives this really interesting historical perspective on how income tax was introduced. It started with this Robin Hood idea, taking from the rich to help the poor.
Okay.
But as governments needed more money, income tax expanded, and it started impacting the middle class too. And the wealthy, they didn't just sit back.
They found ways around it.
Yeah, they've found legal and financial strategies to protect their wealth, to minimize their taxes. And one of the most powerful tools they used is corporations.
And the book is clear that a corporation doesn't necessarily mean some huge building.
No, not at all. It's a legal entity. A file folder with legal documents, as the author puts it.
So you set up this separate structure.
Yeah. And this structure lets wealthy people take advantage of things like lower corporate tax rates, and they can deduct certain business expenses before paying taxes, which reduces their overall taxable income. It's all perfectly legal.
So it's not about evading taxes.
No, it's about understanding the rules and using them strategically.
So understanding the system is key.
It is. If you don't know how it works, you're more likely to be disadvantaged by it.
You're playing the game blindfolded.
Exactly. And the book also talks about a power dynamic. When you work for someone else, you're giving them and the government a lot of financial power. But when your money is working for you, through your assets, you retain more of that power.
It shifts the balance.
Yeah, it does.
And the author uses his own example, the story about buying his Porsche, to illustrate this.
Yeah, he talks about how he reinvested his sales commissions from Xerox into assets held within his own corporation. And because of this structure, he He could legally use pre-tax money from the corporation to cover expenses related to those assets, including his Porsche. So while others just saw him spending his commissions, he was actually using a sophisticated strategy to reduce his taxes and build wealth.
So it's about playing the game smarter.
Exactly. And the book emphasizes that this kind of strategic financial planning is a key part of being financially intelligent. And it also mentions other legal ways that corporations can cover things like gym memberships or certain meals as business expenses.
So there are benefits built into the system.
There are, if you know how to use them.
It's a different approach from the typical middle-class way of owning everything personally, which leaves them more vulnerable to higher taxes.
Right. And that leads into the fifth lesson. The rich invent money.
What does that even mean, inventing money?
It's about financial creativity, about having the courage to take calculated risks. The book argues that just earning a high salary or saving money isn't always enough. You need to develop what it calls financial genius.
So the ability to solve financial problems in creative ways.
Yeah, and to see opportunities that others miss.
And it says that fear and self-doubt hold people back.
Yeah, those are big barriers.
They prevent people from using their financial genius.
Exactly. And while doing well in school is important, the book argues that real-world success in finance and entrepreneurship requires different qualities. Courage, a willingness to take risks, the ability to bounce back from setbacks, and a creative way of thinking about money and opportunities.
And having that financial IQ, it helps you see those opportunities, right?
Yeah, you start to see opportunities where others see problems, and that's how you create your own luck. And the rich dad had this interesting saying, money isn't real.
Okay, explain that one.
He meant that money is just an idea, a social construct.
Something we've all agreed upon.
Exactly. But if you don't understand how money works, if you have limiting beliefs about it, you can actually create poverty for yourself, even if you earn a decent income.
Because your mindset is holding you back.
Exactly. The book contrasts saving money with actively seeking out and creating opportunities for growth. It's about being proactive.
And there's that great story in the book about buying a house with no money down, which is a perfect example of this idea.
Yeah, that was a classic example. I found a house for $75,000, borrowed $2,000 from a friend as a deposit, then immediately advertised it for $60,000 with no money down.
And because the price was lower, you found a buyer quickly.
I did. I basically acted as a middleman, making a profit from the agreement itself without having to invest much of my own money. Then I gave the buyer a 30-year loan, creating a long-term income stream.
Wow, that's a really smart strategy. And the book briefly mentions other examples of inventing money, like understanding things like foreclosures and tax lien certificates.
Yeah, it's about knowing where to look and how to use your financial knowledge to find those hidden opportunities.
So it's not just about sticking to the traditional investments.
No, it's about being creative, finding those less obvious paths.
And the book also makes a distinction between return of investment and return on investment, which I found really helpful.
Yeah, that's a key concept.
Yeah.
Smart investors, they don't just look at the percentage return they make, they also want their initial investment back as quickly as possible.
So they get their money back, and then they own an asset that keeps generating income.
Exactly. That's the ideal scenario.
So you're not just chasing profits, you're also building a solid base of assets.
Right. And the book points out that the best opportunities aren't always easy to find. You have to network, you have to negotiate, and you have to have the knowledge to structure those deals effectively.
It's about being proactive and informed.
Exactly.
And then there's that story about the talented writer who didn't want to learn about sales, which really shows how a missing skill can hold you back.
Oh yeah, that was a good example. She was an amazing writer, but she thought learning to sell her work was beneath her. But by combining her writing skills with even basic sales and marketing knowledge, she could have made so much more money.
So, you might be really good at something, but if you're missing a key skill, it can limit your potential.
Absolutely. And in the book, it talks about how financial intelligence is really a combination of skills. Accounting, investing, understanding markets, and understanding the law.
It's about having a well-rounded understanding of the financial world.
Right. And that's why the author decided to leave his safe job at Xerox.
Even though it seemed like a good career move?
Yeah. But he realized that learning to overcome his fear of selling, a skill he knew he needed, was more important than job security. It went against what his educated dad believed, but it was the right decision for him.
And that brings us to the final core lesson. Work to learn, not for money.
Exactly. This lesson is all about shifting your focus from the immediate paycheck to the long-term benefits of gaining new skills.
So it's about investing in your future.
Yeah. And the book outlines 5 main reasons why people fail to achieve financial success.
Okay, what are those 5 reasons?
Fear, cynicism, laziness, bad habits, and arrogance.
Okay, let's go through those one by one. What about fear?
Well, the book says that everyone experiences fear, especially the fear of losing money. Even the wealthiest people feel it. But the difference is how you handle that fear. Successful people, they learn from their mistakes, and they view failures as stepping stones.
They don't let fear paralyze them.
Exactly. The book uses the example of Remember the Alamo. It's a reminder that even big losses can teach you valuable lessons that lead to future wins.
So, it's about having that mindset of playing to win, not just playing not to lose.
That's a good distinction.
And what about cynicism, that second reason?
The book calls this the Chicken Little syndrome, that voice of doubt that says, it'll never work, or it's too good to be true.
That inner critic.
Yeah. And it can be really expensive because it keeps you from taking action. It keeps you stuck in your comfort zone.
And the third obstacle is laziness.
Yes. And the book distinguishes between being busy and being lazy. A lot of people stay busy with unimportant things just to avoid dealing with the important stuff, especially their finances.
So it's about prioritizing the right things.
Right. And then there's that don't want mentality, focusing on what you don't want to do instead of finding solutions. The book tells the story of Colonel Sanders and how he kept going despite all the rejections.
So it's about persistence, about not giving up easily.
Exactly.
And the fourth reason is bad habits.
Yeah, and the book says that our financial situation is a reflection of our habits. It emphasizes being aware of where your money is going and practicing the pay yourself first principle.
Which means putting money aside for your assets before you pay anything else.
Exactly. It's about prioritizing your future financial well-being.
And the last obstacle is arrogance.
Yes, and the book defines it as ego combined with ignorance. True intelligence is about being humble, about knowing that you don't know everything, and being open to learning new things. It's about listening more than you speak.
So, be open to new ideas and seek out advice from those who know more than you.
Yeah. And it also talks about choosing your friends carefully, because you tend to adopt the habits of the people you spend the most time with.
You become like the people you surround yourself with.
Right. So if you want to be successful financially, surround yourself with people who are already successful.
Makes sense. And then the book talks about finding a formula for making money and then having the discipline to stick with it.
Absolutely. Once you find a strategy that works, it's about being consistent, about having the self-discipline to implement it over time.
And it also talks about the importance of managing your cash flow, managing people, and managing your time effectively.
Yes, those are essential skills.
Even if you're not running a traditional business, you're still managing your own personal business.
That's a good way to put it.
And the pay yourself first principle comes up again in this section.
Yeah, it's about making your financial well-being a priority. Even if it's a small amount, put money aside for your assets before anything else. The book says that the pressure of having bills will actually push you to find more creative ways to earn money.
So, it forces you to think outside the box.
Yeah, it does. And the book ends this lesson with some practical steps you can take to start your financial education journey.
Like what?
Find mentors, take classes, make offers on investments, explore potential investment areas, study financial history. The key is to take action.
Get moving. Stop procrastinating.
Exactly.
And after these core lessons, there's a short section called Assets Buy Luxuries.
Yeah, the main point there is that you should use the income from your assets to buy luxuries, not your earned income. Don't go into debt for things you don't need.
So, build your wealth first.
Right.
And there's a mention of the need for heroes.
Yeah, it talks about the importance of having financial role models, people whose strategies and mindsets you can learn from. They can inspire you and show you that success is possible.
And the final message of this section is take action.
It is. It's a reminder that financial education is a lifelong process, and you need to start taking steps today.
Okay, so as we wrap up our deep dive into Rich Dad, Poor Dad, what are the most important things you would want our listeners to take away?
I'd say the biggest takeaways are the importance of financial literacy, understanding the difference between assets and liabilities, making your money work for you, being willing to take calculated risks, and constantly learning.
So it's really about changing your mindset about money.
Yeah, the book makes it clear that what you think about money determines what you'll have financially. Money is just an idea, and it's how we use that idea that matters.
So for you, the learner, think about this. What are the rules of money that you're following right now? Are those rules helping you achieve your goals? What's one small step you can take?